Welcome to Natu Reads, an audio library of revolutionary texts. Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, by Kwame Nkrumah. Part 11. Mining interests in Central Africa. If we examine the intricacies of the Anglo-American extension through the exploitation of Africa's raw materials, we find its strong arm holding down the wealth of Rhodesia, South Africa, and Southwest Africa, both through direct holdings as well as through those of its American Engelhard and Kennecott Copper associates and the British South Africa Company Limited. The British South Africa Company was a creation of Cecil Rhodes' genius in empire building. Watching the scramble for lands in South Africa in the early 1890s, he decided that unless he got in quickly, other European adventurers would take up, quote, large tracts of valuable country ruled by savage native chiefs in the interior of Africa, end quote. Using his notorious agents, Rudd, Maguire, Rochford, and Thompson, war was provoked between the Matabeles of what is now known as Rhodesia and their chief, Lobengula. Troops of the South African Company went ostensibly to the support of the chief against his people. This trick of Rhodes, described by certain historians as, quote, a draught handling, end quote, secured the company a concession to work mineral rights in the vast expanse of land that now forms the whole of Rhodesia. When Lobengula woke up to the bitter realization of the trickery that had divested him and his people of the rights in their own land, he petitioned Queen Victoria as follows, quote, some time ago, a party of men came into my country, the principal one appearing to be a man named Rudd. They asked me for a place to dig gold, and they said they would give me certain things for the right to do so. I told them to bring what they would give, and I would then show them what I would give. A document was written and presented to me for signature. I asked what it contained and was told that in it were my words and the words of these men. I put my hand to it. About 3 months afterwards, I heard from other sources that I had given by that document the right of all the minerals of my country. I called a meeting of my Indunas and also of the white men, and demanded a copy of the document. It was proved to me that I had signed away the mineral rights of my whole country to one Rudd and his friends. I have since had a meeting of my Indunas, and they will not recognize the paper, as it contains neither my words nor the words of those who got it. After the meeting, I demanded that the original document be returned to me. It has not come yet, although it is 2 months since, and they promised to bring it back soon. The men of the party, who were in my country at that time, were told to remain until the document was brought back. One of them, Maguire, is now left without my knowledge and against my orders. I write to you that you may know the truth about this and may not be deceived. With renewed and cordial greetings, Lobengula, end quote. Who in those days gave back land filched by whatever means from savage native chiefs? And who today will give them back to the people from whom they were taken, unless that people insist on their return by their determined and united will expressed by a union government? At the close of the 19th century, Rhodes, dreaming of a Cape to Cairo empire, pushed from Matabeleland and Mashonaland across the Zambezi into the country now called Zambia. Thus, he drove a wedge between the Portuguese colonies of Mozambique and Angola. All this was done with the buccaneers of his South Africa Company, which had received 3 supplementary charters since the initial one was granted in 1889. Originally, the company had administrative rights over the territory in southern Africa, lying to the north of Bechuanaland, to the north and west of the Transvaal, and west of Portuguese East Africa. It also had rights to extend the Cape Railway and telegraph systems northward and to make concessions of mining, forest, or other rights, and much more besides. Its administrative and monopoly rights in northern and southern Rhodesia were ceded to the British government only as late as 1923 to 24. Mineral rights in the Rhodesias, however, were still retained, as well as a half interest for 40 years in the next proceeds in the disposal of land in northwestern Rhodesia. In return, the British South Africa Company received a cash payment from the British government of £3,750,000. The commutation of its half interest in the proceeds of land disposal was made in 1956 for an annual payment of £50,000 for the remaining 8 years to run from 31 March 1957. A cash purchase of the mineral rights was made by the Southern Rhodesia government in 1933 for £2 million, this time from African taxpayers' money. This still left the company with its mineral rights in Northern Rhodesia, which, by arrangement, it is to enjoy until 1 October 1986. However, since 1 October 1949, it was paying to the government of Northern Rhodesia 20% of the net revenue from these mineral rights, which sum was regarded as an expense for the purpose of Northern Rhodesian income tax. Furthermore, net revenue was defined as the profits of the company derived from its mineral rights, calculated in the same manner as for the purpose of Northern Rhodesian income tax, i.e., after expenses have been charged against it. The arrangement provided for the non-imposition of mineral royalties as such in Northern Rhodesia, while Her Majesty's government undertook to secure, so far as possible, that any government which became responsible during the 37-year period, that is, up to 1 October 1986, for the administration of Northern Rhodesia, should be bound by these arrangements. The British South Africa Company, in spite of recent action taken by the government of Zambia to secure mineral rights, is still extremely powerful. It owns forests, agricultural estates, and real property in Zambia, Rhodesia, and Bechuanaland. It also has mineral rights in 16,000 square miles of Malawi territory. It forms Cecil Holdings Limited to acquire the whole share capital of British South Africa Company's subsidiaries, with the exception of Rhodesia Railways Trust Limited. Another formation, British South Africa Investments Limited, acquired the greater part of the parent company's investments in 1958. British South African Company Management Services Limited, British South Africa Citrus Products Limited, Charter Properties Private Limited, Indaba Investments Private Limited, Beat Holdings Private Limited, Jameson Development Holdings Private Limited, British South Africa Company Holdings Limited, UK. The British South Africa Company was divested of the greater part of its holdings in companies operating primarily in the Republic of South Africa by its participation in the 1961 exchange of shares with De Beers Investment Trust Limited. It still retains its holding of 700,000 shares in Union Corporation Limited. The company's close association with Mr. Harry Oppenheimer and the Anglo-American Corporation in the Rhodesias is to be drawn tighter by means of a proposed share deal between them, by which 1 to 2 million ordinary 10-shilling shares of Anglo-American will be exchanged for 2 to 5 million pounds in £1 shares of New Rhodesia Investments Limited, a public company registered in Rhodesia and equally owned by Mr. Oppenheimer's Brenthurst Investments Trust Property Limited and British South Africa's tributary Cecil Holdings. New Rhodesia investments include mining finance, 45 to 94%, gold, 14 to 45%, diamonds, 9 to 38%, coal, 2.49%, sundry companies, 1.9%. On 31 December 1962, the market value of these holdings was put at £10,500,000, while New Rhodesia Investments' net assets stood at £12,100,000. As for Anglo-American Corporation, its net assets at the end of 1961 were £114,500,000. New Rhodesia's important block of shares in Consolidated Mines Selection Trust Limited will be increased as a result of the current financial arrangement with Anglo-American, whose own share capital will be augmented from 9 million to 10 million pounds by the creation of another 2 million 10-shilling shares. The complicated links between superficially separate entities are shown by their investments in concerns of common interest. New Rhodesia's major buyings into the Diamond Corporation, Johannesburg Consolidated Investment Co. Limited, and Rhodesian Anglo-American Limited tie up closely with Anglo-Americans' activities in the Rhodesias and in the Congo and Portuguese territories. Johannesburg Consolidated is concerned principally with diamonds, copper, gold, and platinum. It also carries on prospecting operations, mainly in South Africa and Rhodesia. Its subsidiary companies include, among others, Barnato Brothers Limited and Barnato Holdings Limited, and the important African Asbestos Cement Corporation Limited. An associated company, Matt Smelters Property Limited, is jointly owned by Rustenburg Platinum Mines Limited and Johnson Matthey & Co. Limited. Johnson Matthey, a UK firm treating copper, nickel, platinum, and other metals, supervised the erection of plants in the vicinity of Rustenburg to treat part of the product of Matt Smelters. Johannesburg Consolidated's last issue of shares was in 1958, when 600,000 were issued to new Rhodesian investments. Rhodesian Anglo-American has large shareholdings in the leading copper mines of Rhodesia. These direct holdings are swollen by those of companies in which it has interest. Thus, a 52.39% interest in the ordinary A stock of Rokana Corporation Limited gives it an added interest of 17 to 63% in Nchanga Consolidated Copper Mines Limited, in which its direct participation is 21 to 42%. Through its penetration of Rokana and Nchanga, Rhodesia Anglo-American has an indirect interest in Rhodesia Copper Refineries Limited. Again, its oblique participation in Mufulira Copper Mines Limited via Rokana increases its own participation of 572,213 shares to 13 to 92%. In Rhodesian Alloys Private Limited, a producer of ferrochrome, it has 263,226 shares, and in Rhodesia Broken Hill Development Co. Limited, 1,425,905 stock units. An almost 25% holding of Kansanshi Copper Mining Co. Limited has been secured by the acquisition of 394,209 shares. Rhodesian Anglo-American's direct and indirect participation in Bancroft Mines Limited amounts to 24 to 54%. Rokana gives it an interest in Chibuluma Mines Limited, while Rokana, in association with Nchanga, leads it into Kalindini Exploration Limited. A holding of 34,100 shares gives it a substantial purchase into Kasemba Minerals Limited, a company carrying out prospecting operations in the western province of Zambia. Nor are other prospecting companies ignored by Rhodesian Anglo-American. 31.5% of Anglo-American Prospecting Rhodesia Limited has come under its control, and 333,375 shares of Chartered Exploration Limited. Iron, steel, and coal also come within its range. It owns 596,600 shares in Lubimbi Coal Areas Limited, holding prospecting rights for coal over an area of approximately 130 square miles in the southern Rhodesian mining district of Bulawayo. This shareholding gives Rhodesian Anglo-American 65% control of Lubimbi, the other 35% belonging to Wangi Colliery, 2 million of whose shares are in Rhodesian Anglo-American hands. 40% gives it a major part of the Iron Duke Mining Co. Limited, and it also has a substantial interest in the Rhodesian Iron and Steel Co. Limited. Sundry other interests make Rhodesian Anglo-American a leading controller of Zambia's economic life. Finance and investment are included by, among others, 20% of Rhodesian Acceptances Limited, and a half share in Overseas and Rhodesian Investment Co. Limited. Roanglo Mine Services Limited, wholly owned, provides a valuable source of income for administrative and other services. Cement and clay bring it into the building, and allied trades through 148,961 shares in Premier Portland Cement Co. Rhodesia Limited, and 25% of Clay Products Private Limited. Bancroft Mines seems to provide the richest pickings for the cast iron digestion of the Anglo-American Hydra. This company was formed only in 1953 to take up from, quote, the owners of the mineral rights, the British South Africa Co., end quote. Special grants of mining rights and prospecting rights acquired from Rokana. Capital is authorized at £13,750,000. The British South Africa Co. took up 3 million shares, Rokana 9,500,000, and Rhodesian Anglo-American 74,700. There was an interchange of shares with Rokana as well as with Rhodesian Anglo-American. In 1955, an additional 2 million shares were subscribed for by Anglo-American and British South Africa Co., who have provided loans of £2 million and £3 million respectively. Anglo-American, Rhodesian Anglo-American, Umchanga, and Rokana were given an option on 3 million of Bancroft's ordinary shares up to 31 March 1963. In December 1961, the right was exercised on 1 million of the shares, of which Rhodesian Anglo-American acquired 400,000. Rhodesian Anglo-American's own capital is £7 million, and its consolidated net profit for the year ended 30 June 1961 was £20,590,783, after providing £11,541,475 for taxation. Dividends absorbed £5,403,535. These tightly braided interests are of special concern to the people of Zambia and Rhodesia, whose existence and fate they dominate. Not for nothing is Mr. Harry Oppenheimer enlarging his own personal stake through the proposals concerning the share exchange between Anglo-American and British South Africa Co. in New Rhodesia Investments, a tributary of British South Africa's tributary, Cecil Holding. By the arrangements, British South Africa will have wider share in Anglo-American's activities through the establishment of a local Rhodesian board for the chartered company, under the chairmanship of Sir Frederick Crawford. Sir Frederick Crawford is at present the company's resident director in Rhodesia. As a former governor of Uganda, he brought with him his proconsular experience in the ruling of natives. Uganda also provides, as local director in Zambia, C.P.S. Allen, until recently permanent Undersecretary of State to its Prime Minister. Thus are imperialist agents rewarded for their services to their real masters. Opposition to the establishment of the local board was met by British South Africa Co.'s president, P.V. Emrys Evans, with the explanation that it will provide a greater degree of autonomy for local management, and will strengthen the company's representation in Zambia. Mr. Emrys Evans is himself a director of Anglo-American Corporation, as well as of Rio Tinto Zinc Corporation Limited. Mr. Emrys Evans carries the interest of Barclays Bank DCO by his directorship of the bank, and his solicitude for Rhodesia's development is implicit in his seat on the board of Rhodesia Railways Trust Limited, a British South Africa company subsidiary. His further connection with Oppenheimer's far-flung empire is confirmed by his membership of the London Committee of Rand Selection Corporation Limited. The death of Lord Robbins elevated him from the vice presidency to the head of the British South Africa Co.'s board, where among his colleagues were the late Sir C.J. Hambro, Harry Oppenheimer, L.F.A. d'Erlanger, and another former proconsul, Viscount Malvern, who brings with him the blessings of the Merchant Bank of Central Africa, Scottish Rhodesian Finance Limited, and the Standard Bank of South Africa. A good deal of Mr. Emrys Evans' 1962 annual report to the shareholders was devoted to what is described as ill-informed criticism of the, quote, group's alleged policy of removing large sums of money from the country while being unwilling to invest in its development, end quote. The attempt to rebut this criticism by the affirmation that over 10 years, the company had invested over £10 million in the territory, an average of over £1 million a year, would not convince Rhodesian Africans, who were well aware that the company received in gross income from its Northern Rhodesian copper royalties alone in the year 1961-2 the sum of £10,900,000. Taxation goes to the United Kingdom and South Africa, as also do dividends, which for the year 1959-60 absorbed £4,128,863 out of a consolidated net profit of £8,148,245, arrived at after writing off almost £1 million for depreciation of investments and over £5,400,000 for taxation. Rhodes's original links with the Rand and Kimberley mines have been knit more closely together by 1,000 strands with Rhodesia and Zambia than it was possible for him to envisage at the time, though it was his overriding hope and ambition. This interwoven fabric partly provides the hangman's rope that is trying to strangle African independence and the political unification of Africa. 12. Companies and combines. To give anything like a complete account of the complicated network of foreign companies which, at present, govern so much of Africa's economic life would be impossible within the space of a single book. Yet some reference to the most important of them is necessary, and in many cases, their connecting interests can be shown in a diagram form. Behind the facade of separateness, strong connecting links bind these powerful firms together. In East Africa, one of the most powerful concerns is Tanganyika Concessions. The name is misleading. It was actually registered in London towards the end of January 1899. Today, control of the company is wielded from Salisbury, Rhodesia, whence it was removed in the latter part of 1950. Operations in Tanganyika have not yet been fully developed, though they cover 2 important gold mines and a mineral company, and include some prospecting. The company's writ has greater significance in Zambia, where it acquired from British South Africa Co. a concession over a large area, together with certain prospecting rights. From Zambia, its activities spawn into the Congo, where it controls a mineral concession of 60,000 square miles secured from the Katanga, Belgian Special Committee. For giving Tanganyika concession rights over this expanse of Congolese land, the Katanga Committee enjoyed the benefit of a 60% share in the royalty paid by Union Minière. We must not for one moment, however, allow ourselves to be led into the error of thinking that Tanganyika concessions thus permitted themselves to be bested by the Special Committee. The company becomes a member of the committee. In the way of financiers who, cautiously and shrewdly, do not place all their eggs in a single basket, a new organization was created to take care of a concession covering a surface about 3/5 the size of Ghana. This is the celebrated Union Minière du Haut-Katanga, whose reputation over the years has become notorious for the merciless exploitation of the Congo. Another strategic interest of Tanganyika concessions is the railway running from Lobito Bay in Angola up to the Angola-Congo border, operated by the Benguela Railway Company, Companhia do Caminho de Ferro de Benguela. The railway company is a creation of Tanganyika Concessions, which holds £2,700,000, or 90% of its £2 shares, as well as the whole of the debenture capital. The Benguela Railway, during 1961, built a branch line from the town of Robert Williams into the mining region of Guima, which was opened in August 1962. Commonwealth Timber Industries Limited, a vast forestry and lumber concern, is also 60% owned by Tanganyika Concessions. Novaboard UK Limited, the English affiliate of Commonwealth Timber, was able, with the assistance of the African companies with which Société Générale is associated, to construct a sawmill and factory for the manufacture of fiberwood panels at Thetford and Norfolk. The factory's capacity will make possible the production of about 25 million square feet of panels yearly, the capital invested being around £2 million. When Tanganyika Concessions was about to change its headquarters from London to Salisbury, it gave an undertaking to HM Treasury, which no doubt had some bearing on the British government's vacillating policy and the breakdown of the Central African Federation. It must also color its behavior in regard to the Congo and to Portuguese rule in Africa. The undertaking provided that for a minimum period of 10 years, Tanganyika Concessions would not, without consent of the British Treasury, quote, dispose of, or charge or pledge its interests, or any part thereof, in Union Minière du Haut-Katanga, or the Benguela Railway, end quote, except, in the case of the latter, to the Portuguese government under the terms of the concessions agreement. The limitation did not end with the expiration of the 10-year period, as a conjunctive clause provided that subsequently, quote, no sale or other disposal of such interests or any part thereof, except as aforesaid, shall be made without the securities proposed to be sold or otherwise disposed of first being offered to HM Treasury at the same price and on the same terms as have been offered to a third party." End quote. These provisions have given the British government a direct concern in the operations of Tanganyika concessions, Union Minière, and the Benguela Railway, which is bound to influence their behavior in relation to the independence struggle in southern and central Africa. More particularly, in view of the special relations which Great Britain has had with its oldest ally, Portugal. From the point of view of the companies themselves, they must feel encouraged by the special interests of the British government in maintaining their strategic position across the great central belt of Africa. Tanganyika Concessions, both directly and through Tanganyika Holdings, has an important participation in Rhodesia Katanga Co. Limited, with which, in conjunction with Zambezia Exploring, interests were acquired in the Kakamega Goldfield, Kenya, which were transferred to Kenton Gold Areas, in which Rhodesia Katanga has a substantial holding. Rhodesia Katanga is indebted to the British South Africa Co. by reason of the perpetual mining rights the latter has granted it over any materials, including coal but excluding diamonds and precious stones, which may be found in about 2,500 square miles of Zambia. Additionally, it has perpetual coal mining rights in 20 areas of 300 acres, each subject to 15% interest of the British South Africa Co. To complete Tanganyika Concessions' roster of subsidiaries, there is the wholly owned Tanganyika Properties Rhodesia Limited, registered in Salisbury, Rhodesia. It provides office and staff accommodations together with allied services, as well as holding certain investments. Consolidated profit made by Tanganyika Concessions for the year ended 31 July 1961 was £3,296,325, out of a total revenue of £4,462,667. Its current assets are £4,380,163 in shares and debentures of Benguela Railway Co., £5,300,318 in shares and loan to the Commonwealth Timber Industries, £1,317,793 in Tanganyika Holdings, and £4,019,629 in Union Minière, whose ramifications will be examined in a later chapter. Coming to the Southwest Africa Co. Limited, we find Anglo-American Corporation and Consolidated Goldfields merging to exploit a vast section of the wealth of southern Africa. The Southwest Africa Co. Limited was registered in London on 18 August 1892, and has a special grant of exclusive prospecting and mining rights over some 3,000 square miles of the Damaraland concession area of Southwest Africa. This grant was made by the administration of Southwest Africa for a period of 5 years from 2 January 1942, and has since been renewed until 2 January 1967. The company also holds mining areas in various other districts of Southwest Africa. It produces tin wolfram and zinc lead concentrates, as well as vanadates. Large areas of land, such as those held by the Southwest Africa Co., demand extremely heavy capital investment to exploit and encourage the formation of alliances between groups desirous of controlling output, distribution, and hence the prices of raw materials. Not only that, it facilitates the channeling of their processing through the allied organizations. To pursue this policy of coordination, the Southwest Africa Co. signed an agreement with a joint Anglo-American Consolidated Goldfields venture by which it subleased certain of its rights to explore and exploit its concessions. The Newmont Mining Corporation was formed in Delaware, USA, on 2 May 1921. The purpose of the company is to acquire, develop, finance, and operate mining properties. For this purpose, a share capital of $60 million has been authorized. At 31 December 1961, 2,824,518 of the authorized $6 million $10 shares had been issued and paid up. Mining exploration is carried on by the company through Newmont Exploration Limited, Delaware, Newmont Mining Corporation of Canada Limited, and Newmont of South Africa Property Limited. We have already met certain of the Rio Tinto companies in Zambia and Rhodesia, and have touched upon others in connection with the Société Générale de Belgique's association with the North American financial and industrial scene. The Rio Tinto complex is one that would be hard to miss in any attempt to examine the ramifications of the international mining world. It stretches from the United Kingdom across Spain into Africa and over the Atlantic into Canada and the USA, with forays into Germany, Belgium, Austria, Australia, and elsewhere. The hands of Anglo-American Corporation, Consolidated Zinc Corporation, and world-embracing aluminum groups are firmly clasped within it, and representatives of the Congo combination of companies adorn the directories which bear such aristocratic names as Rothschild and Cavendish-Bentinck. Though its original interests were mining pyrites in Spain, the Rio Tinto Co. Limited was registered in London in 1873. Keeping up with the times and the general trend towards combination and monopoly, the company underwent certain changes. Its directors were among the most fervent supporters of General Franco at the time of the Spanish Civil War. This devotion to the caudillo's cause undoubtedly prospered them so that, together with their associates in the wider financial sphere, they have been able to spread their tentacles through the zinc and aluminum industry into the precious metals and general metals fields. In 1954, Rio Tinto transferred its Spanish assets to a company which it formed in Spain with a capital of 1 billion pesetas, under the title of Compañía Española de Minas de Rio Tinto, S.A. For this worthy proof of its sensitiveness to Spanish patriotism, it received a compensation of 36,666,830 pesetas in settlement of profits accumulated up to 1 January 1954, and all the 333,333 B shares of 1,000 pesetas each in the new company. Additionally, it was awarded a sterling payment of £7,666,665. Rio Tinto still draws a retainer as a provider of technical and commercial services in London for the Spanish company, in which its holding of all the B shares still gives it a direct interest. Rio Tinto is now an investment holding company, whose financial operations have brought it to the forefront of industrial entrepreneurship. Africa is well up among its spheres of activity, its most important holdings on the continent being in Rokana Corporation and in Changa copper mines, where, as we have seen, it is associated with the British South Africa Co., Anglo-American Corporation, Union Corporation, Tanganyika Concessions, Union Minière, and Rand Selection Trust in their holdings in the important Rhodesian and South Africa mining and industrial ventures. So tortuous and incredibly expansile are the links that tie the groups exploiting Africa's resources with those enriching themselves in other corners of the earth that we should find nothing remarkable in being led back from Rio Tinto in Africa, via some of the most powerful American and British financial forces, into Rio Tinto in Canada. One of the most lively motivating springs of monopoly is to forestall in new or unexplored areas the entry of rival groups, and where this proves abortive or impossible, to collaborate with them. We shall see in a later chapter how Canadian Eldorado forced Union Minière to bring down the price of uranium, and how their interests lock through Sogemuna's representation on the former's board. In the world of Western free enterprise, competition is being eroded by monopoly's role of the Lone Ranger after undivided profits. Thus are African riches brought to support the manipulative ramifications of international finance capital. Between Société Générale and Rio Tinto, there is interposed a solid phalanx of interwoven power that moves out stealthily across the world. Breaking into the aluminum world, Rio Tinto formed an alliance with Consolidated Zinc Corporation Limited. This merger appeared superficially to bring together two powerful groups having no joint leading strings. This ostensible separation would mislead only the ignorant. Its subterfuge is immediately destroyed by a single glance at its combined directorate, which at once shows up the connections with South African mining and financial interests. P.V. Emrys Evans is a prominent member, and the Right Honourable Lord Ballieu, KBE CMG, Deputy Chairman. Lord Ballieu is also Deputy Chairman of the Central Mining and Investment Corporation Limited, a leading investment and finance house within the Anglo-American group of companies directed by Harry F. Oppenheimer and C.W. Engelhard. Mr. Emrys Evans is also important in his own right, being vice president of the British South Africa Co. and a director of Anglo-American. However, the connection goes further than that. British South Africa Holdings Limited and some of its associates, under an agreement dated 7 December 1960, subscribed £10 million to Consolidated Zinc in the form of 5.5% loan stock in return for options to acquire 2,285,714 ordinary shares of £1 each in Consolidated Zinc at a price of 87 shillings 6 pence a share. Here we enter into the intricate maze of aluminum financial policies into which Consolidated Zinc has made deep incursions by its alliance with the Kaiser Aluminum and Chemical Corporation and Commonwealth Aluminum Corporation Property Limited, commonly known as Comalco. The options acquired by British South Africa Holdings can be exercised any time between 1 June 1966 and 1 July 1968, or the date on which Commonwealth or its associated operating companies have produced a total of 200,000 long tons of aluminum ingots in the proposed new refinery to be erected by Comalco, whichever is the later. Kaiser Aluminum's principal interest is in its wholly owned Kaiser Bauxite Co. Jamaica. In addition to its mining activities, Kaiser operates processing and chemical plants in the United States and Canada, and has investments in the aluminum, mining, reduction, and fabricating facilities and marketing industries in the United Kingdom, South America, Africa, and Asia. It operates through two fully owned subsidiaries, Kaiser Aluminum and Chemical Sales Incorporated and Kaiser Aluminum International Corporation. Like Reynolds Metals, Kaiser Aluminum only broke into the United States aluminum industry under the impetus of wartime demands for aircraft metal. Before the Second World War, Aluminum Co. of America, Alcoa, was the sole domestic producer of primary aluminum. Consolidated Zinc, with an authorized capital of £25 million, has extensive interests which make it a formidable controller of a number of important metals and allied chemical products. Formed less than 15 years ago, in February 1949, its purposes were, quote, to develop, extend, and carry on or finance, either itself or through any of its subsidiary or associated companies, the development, extension, and carrying on of the lead and zinc mining and other raw material producing industries and the smelting, refining, manufacturing, and other industries associated therewith, throughout the world, and particularly in the Commonwealth, end quote. All this apparently has no connection with Africa, but we have only to look at some of the directorates to discover immediately how close the links are with the Oppenheimer network and the financial groups that associate with it. Such are the mammoth gold-clad interests that are behind the Consolidated Zinc Rio Tinto merger. The new holding company, Rio Tinto Zinc Corporation Limited, was created by a financial operation that gave shareholders of Consolidated Zinc 58 ordinary shares of 10 shillings each in the new company in exchange for every 20 shares of £1 each in Consolidated Zinc. Rio Tinto stockholders received 41 shares of 10 shillings each in the new company for every 20 ordinary stock units of 10 shillings held in Rio Tinto. Preference shares in both companies were also exchanged for preference shares in the new one. The merger brings Rio Tinto Zinc well into the forefront of the aluminum field, accentuating its already important position in the zinc, lead, and non-ferrous metals field. It brings Consolidated Zinc more fully into the sphere of mineral exploitation in Africa by reason of Rio Tinto's holdings and some of the principal concerns operating in South Africa, Rhodesia, and elsewhere. The connections with the American, Canadian, and Australian industrial and financial scenes are apparent from the foregoing very brief review. Through these interests, the Rio Tinto Zinc Combine has additional strings which lead back again to Africa. There are some rare and localized non-metallic materials which are used in basic and secondary industries. These include asbestos, corundum, mica, vermiculite, phosphate rock, gypsum, mineral pigments, fluorspar, and silica. The most important is asbestos. It is found in three principal fibers: chrysolite, crocodolite or blue asbestos, and amosite. all three fibers have certain common characteristics. They're all non-inflammable, non-conductors of heat and electricity. They are practically insoluble in acids and are capable of being spun into textiles. It is slight differences in these qualities that give them different uses. Chrysolite is the most resistant to fire, and its strong, fine, flexible texture makes it highly suitable for asbestos textiles and for use in brake linings, clutch facings, and insulation fittings. It is also used for asbestos boards and asbestos cement products. Blue asbestos has greater tensile strength and resilience, and though not so resistant to fire, withstands acids and seawater better. It is used chiefly in the manufacture of filter cloth, boiler mattresses, insulation packings, and asbestos cement products. Amosite has a fiber length of 3 to 6 inches and greater resistance to seawater than blue asbestos. These qualities make it particularly suitable for use in spun materials and aircraft. South Africa is, at present, almost the only place in which both blue asbestos and amosite are found. Canada is the greatest producer of chrysolite. South Africa and Rhodesia are far behind. The South African deposits are mainly in Swaziland and in the Eastern Transvaal. They are in the virtual control of a British firm, Turner & Newell Limited, registered in 1920, which has in its hands 90% of the British asbestos trade. This fact enabled it to secure an agreement in 1930 with the Soviet Union regulating deliveries to the continental market. An important producer of high-grade chrysolite, the Soviet Union ceased export after the last war. Superficially unimposing, Turner & Newell's board has as its chairman Ronald G. Scotthill, who is associated with the insurance world as director of Liverpool and Globe Insurance Co. Limited and Royal Insurance Co. Limited, and with finance as director of the District Bank. Its capital, however, is impressive, being authorized at £60 million, with almost £50 million paid up. Originally £3 million, the increase in the size of the company's capital gives an indication of the growth of its dominance of asbestos mining and allied industries. This capitalization becomes more articulate when it is related to the sweep of the Turner Newell Asbestos Kingdom, which is rooted in African and Canadian mines. A holding company, it has a network of subsidiaries throughout the world which manufacture and sell asbestos, magnesia, and connected products. A recent survey reveals that some 60 to 70% of the world's total business activity is controlled by less than 2% of all the companies in the world. The colossal Unilever Trust is a perfect illustration of this monopolistic ratio of control. For millions of housewives, there's no such thing as a corporate entity called Unilever. There's just the daily routine of choosing between Lifebuoy and Lux, Pepsodent and Gibbs, Omo and Surf, of buying Lipton's tea, Wall's sausages and Bird's Eye frozen foods, Flytox, Stork margarine, and Harriet Hubbard Ayers cosmetics. From the viewpoint of the tax collector also, Unilever is still not a corporate entity, but two separate entities, Unilever Limited, the British company, and Unilever NV, the Dutch company. It has subsidiaries throughout Europe in Belgium, Austria, Denmark, Germany, Finland, Italy, Sweden, and Switzerland. In all these countries, it tends to control the production of soups, frozen foods, soap, margarine, insecticides, detergents, cosmetics, and edible oils. It has also powerful and century-old interests in Latin America, West, Central, and South Africa, India, Ceylon, Malaysia, Trinidad, Thailand, and the Philippines. Unilever's most robust offshoot overseas is the United Africa Company, through which the trust became known as the, quote, uncrowned king of West Africa, end quote. The United Africa Company is the world's largest international trading company, and contrary to the belief that the liberation of colonial territories would automatically suppress monopoly capitalism, the Unilever empire continues to flourish. This is because it has known how to adapt its policy to the, quote, challenge of the times, end quote, as a company report puts it. And so, Unilever is applying its profit-making objectives to other more yielding sectors. It has accelerated its withdrawal from the West African merchandise and produce trade to concentrate on development in cars, engineering, and the pharmaceutical sides of the business. The neo-colonialist aim is not only to export capital, but also to control the overseas market. Thus, attempts are subtly made to prevent developing countries from taking any decisive steps towards industrialization, since the exploitation of the indigenous expanding market is now the prime objective. If the attempts to prevent industrialization fail, then at all costs the trust must secure a participation in a development it cannot prevent. And by its very nature, this participation thwarts any further progress, since it ensures a regular flow of payments into the coffers of monopoly capital in the form of royalties, patents, licensing agreements, technical assistance, equipment, and other services. It also gives priority to the assembling and packaging of foreign products, often presented under the false labels of indigenous concerns. Unilever's present emphasis on the packaging industries is no coincidence. The up-to-date trust relies less on the amount of dividends than on certain clauses in the company agreements, which make indigenous capital dependent on monopoly capital for the renewal of contracts and for the allocation of funds. It is significant that in a recent issue of the New Commonwealth, the United Africa Company has been referred to as the, quote, gentle giant, end quote. Monopoly methods have become more subtle, but Lever's famous statement still seems to hold true. Quote, after all, we are working for the permanent interests of Britain, end quote.